This year, Moscow turns 875 years old. The first public administration bodies of the city appeared in 1785. Now, the legislative power in the capital is the Moscow City Duma. Today, in our program, we will tell you how the parliament of this huge metropolis works.
Today on the program, the past, present, and future of the Moscow City Duma. How and by whom the capital's laws are passed. Moscow People's Militia 1941. How the memory of the defenders of the Russian capital are preserved within the walls of the city parliament.
The Moscow City Duma is the legislative body of the Russian capital. Its history began in 1993. It is here that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the foundations of the city legislation were created. Today, the Moscow City Duma, apart from passing city laws and resolutions, is also involved in appointing some of the heads of Moscow government agencies, reviewing reports of their activities, and taking part in federal legislative initiatives, roundtables, and other activities related to the city's current agenda. The capital's parliament consists of 45 elected deputies who serve 5-year terms. The new history of the Moscow City Duma began in 2014. The number of deputies changed, as well as residents of the capital being able to vote for specific candidates in the elections, and not just for political parties. In that same year, the honored lawyer of Russia, Alexei Shapishnikov, became head of the Moscow City Duma. Alexei Valeryevich, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good to meet. Do you agree that Moscow is the best city in the world?
You know, I don't just agree with you. I'm certain that Moscow is the best city on earth. I'm not the only person who feels this way, and many others, not just Muscovites, feel similarly as well. Even the United Nations says that Moscow is the best city on earth, putting Moscow in first place based on the level of development and the quality of life. We've overtaken other metropolitan areas, such as New York and Singapore. Moscow is constantly developing. It's probably one of the most modern metropolitan areas, not only in Europe, but in the world. This says something about the number of people in Moscow, about those who come here to work, and about the technology, which is constantly developing.
The decision to increase the number of Moscow City Duma deputies in 2014 was signed by the mayor of Moscow, Sergei Sobyanin. This was due to the growing number of residents of the city, the incorporation of new territories, and accordingly, an increase in the workload on the capital's parliament. The renewed parliamentary staff was no longer housed in the building on Petrovka Street, so it moved to a complex of buildings on Strasnoy Boulevard. Here, on the grounds of the historic Gagarin estate, are housed not only deputies and staff of the Moscow City Duma, but also a number of other structures which form the Moscow Parliamentary Center.
As we said earlier, today the Moscow City Duma consists of 45 deputies. They're elected in single-mandate constituencies. The Moscow City Duma is fully staffed and all 45 deputies are at work. As of today, in this convocation, there are 16 commissions, 14 of which are profile commissions, and 2 of which are specialized commissions. Commissions are created by sectors of the urban environment, by sectors of the economy. It must be noted that Moscow is probably the most social metropolis in the world because half of Moscow's budget goes to government social programs. That is, healthcare, education, sports, and other forms of social assistance. And today, all deputies work in all specialized committees. The chairman, deputy chairman, and chairman of commissions work on a permanent paid basis. Other deputies work on a non-permanent basis, and it creates a kind of symbiosis of professional politicians and professionals from various sectors of the urban economy, business, and public organizations. And this interaction has a powerful cumulative effect. Every year, we pass the main city legislation, the city's budget, which is adopted in a 3-year planning process. It's adopted annually, and sometimes adjustments are made to it. There is a very heated discussion during the time in this plenary meeting. The Moscow City Duma takes part in forming the City Electoral Commission and the Public Chamber of Moscow. The deputies also make decisions on the appointment of justices of the peace and call for the election of the mayor. This is in addition to their legislative work.
And tell me, how does Parliament work for the future of Moscow?
Well, you know, passing laws is, in principle, the strategy for the future, because if procedures are not described, then a mess can be created. Passing laws is the way to the future, because they structure relations between various segments of society, between various groups, and between state and business.
What are the peculiarities of parliamentary work in the current political and economic situation?
Well, you know, peculiarities probably began with the beginning of the pandemic, and these peculiarities affected not only the Moscow City Duma, they affected, in principle, the entire world. And here we must speak about very tight work and very close cooperation of the Moscow City Duma and the city government. Only together can we make decisions and take measures which help Muscovites and businesses, both given the difficult position created by the pandemic and the sanctions against our country. A special commission has been set up in Moscow, which is divided into several headquarters, again, depending on the sectors of the city economy. Some deal with import substitution, some deal with organizing new production facilities, and some deal with modern medicine.
It's here that the main meetings of the Moscow City Duma are held and key decisions for the city are made. By the way, the Moscow City Duma is one of the leaders among regional authorities for digitalization. For example, here they have a multiplex modern information technology complex. This allows many processes to be automated, from registering deputies at a meeting to recording their speeches and voting, from submitting initiatives to passing laws and resolutions. All information is stored in a single database where you can find the necessary information at any time. The IT complex made it possible to hold meetings online, which allowed for no interruption of legislative work during the coronavirus restrictions. During the pandemic, the Moscow City Duma became the first and only parliament in the world that switched to remote work, fully preserving all the rules that regulate the adoption of laws. Even during the peak days of the pandemic, the Moscow City Duma promptly took all the necessary decisions remotely. The digitalization of the legislative process during this period was evaluated by the experts who present the Rupa Award, an award bestowed at the end of the industry-wide competition in the field of public relations development. The Moscow City Duma has received an award in the category Anti-Crisis Communications for the implementation of information technologies. And this year, the Parliament of the capital established a kind of world record, having expanded the space where the deputies work up to the International Space Station. On March 23, 2022, Deputy and cosmonaut Oleg Artemyev took part in the Parliament's work for the first time in history and presented a bill to his colleagues from orbit. In the new parliamentary centre of Moscow, not only a new building was built, but also historical buildings located nearby were reconstructed. Let's find out what's inside. The historic manor building on Strasnoy Boulevard with a 12-column portico was built towards the end of the 18th century by the Russian architect Matvey Kazakov for the family of Prince Gagarin. It is recognized as a masterpiece of monumental classicism. The owner of the estate, Prince Gagarin, was a lover of gardening and agriculture, so he arranged a garden with an orangery right next to the house. During the War of 1812, after the retreat of the French army, the building was completely burnt out and remained empty for some time. After 16 years, it was reconstructed and the new Catherine Hospital was housed here. One of the architectural treasures of this building is an old cast iron staircase. It was restored using historic photographs and a fragment of the steps. The portraits of the heads of the city government of the past, years and centuries hang here on the walls. Now there are exhibitions and guided tours. In the historic building of the Parliament, various exhibitions are held. One of the latest is devoted to the 10th anniversary of the incorporation of the new Moscow territories. The Moscow Parliamentary Centre also takes part in the city campaign Night at the Museum. Recently, as part of this project, the Evening in the English Club Ball was held. The guests were given a tour of the Gagarin estate, after which they were introduced to the traditions of balls in Russia and taught dances of the first half of the 19th century. On weekends, the park of the Moscow Parliamentary Centre is open to all. During the days of historical and cultural heritage, you can take a tour of the new and historical buildings of the Moscow City Duma. Here, literally everything is drenched in history. For example, in the front hall in 1806, a gala dinner took place in honor of Prince Bagration, described by Leo Tolstoy in his novel War and Peace. At the beginning of the 19th century, this building was rented to the famous English Club, the center of the noble and social and political life of Russia. Today, new traditions of the Moscow City Duma are being made in this hall. Certificates of honor and gratitude are being presented here, and even marriage ceremonies take place. The reconstruction of the Parliamentary Centre on Strasnoy Boulevard lasted 3 years. During this time, the facades of the main building of the estate and its interiors were renovated. Those aspects of the manor's interior which were restored include the original decor, paintings on the walls, and a fresco depicting the Ascension in the former church. In addition, the grounds of the park were restored according to the drawings of the architect Bove. The estate was completed with the addition of a new building where deputies of the Moscow City Duma and their assistants work.
Well, firstly we should thank the Moscow mayor, Sergei Sobyanin, for the decision he made in 2014 to change the number of Moscow City Duma deputies from 35 to 45, with the adoption of new federal laws. It was decided to move the Moscow City Duma to a special complex of buildings, which was specifically designed for its work. And in 2015, the Moscow City Duma moved into its new home, the new Catherine Hospital building complex. In fact, these buildings housed the first English club in Moscow. Yes, and the building is indeed both historic and beautiful.
The complex of buildings on Strasnoy Boulevard is the Moscow Parliamentary Centre. In addition to the Moscow City Duma, there are the public chamber of the City of Moscow, the office of the Commissioner for Human Rights, and the Council of Municipalities. Legislative initiatives go a long way from an idea to the enactment of a decision. Many proposals in the Moscow City Duma come from Moscow residents. They appeal to deputies who analyze the proposals of citizens and develop bills. Then the documents are discussed at the meetings of the Moscow City Duma commissions and plenary sessions. Each bill passes a number of readings. Deputies make their comments and amendments. After the Moscow City Duma passes a law, it goes to the mayor of Moscow for his signature and enters into effect.
More often than not, especially in the social sphere, there are ideas about how to improve the lives of Muscovites. And here I can point out that the Moscow City Duma, as one of the subject's legislators, is a kind of pilot for other subjects.
How many laws were passed in the last session?
More than 30 laws of social purpose were adopted in the Moscow City Duma.
The most important law which the Moscow City Duma annually considers is the Moscow City Budget. It is the distribution of funding which determines which areas of life in the capital will develop most dynamically. Moscow has a social budget. More than 50% of the city's funds are allocated to various social programs. What are the key social laws passed by the Moscow City Duma?
These have to do with the payment of pensions and those regional allowances that are paid. Also, support measures for families in need, measures to support school children, and a lot of other things. We also have a program for free lunches at school for children from large families. Also, preferential transportation for children. The Pushkin card is a cultural endeavor, allowing holders to visit museums. It's a great cultural project that gives children the opportunity to participate. And I can't help but boast of a powerful project on Moscow longevity, where people of a certain age acquire a new life, new youth.
Now the Moscow City Duma devotes a great deal of attention to anti-crisis initiatives, supporting citizens and businesses. In Moscow, there is an employment service which allows residents who have lost their jobs to find either a new one in the same field or get free training and get another speciality which is in demand. Today, despite the departure of a number of foreign companies, there are more vacancies in the city than people who have lost their jobs. What anti-crisis projects is the Moscow City Duma implementing?
Anti-crisis projects are primarily related to the loss of labor and employment and import substitution. Moscow has a unique technopark site where those companies that are ready to do localization and complete import substitution on a turnkey basis are now entering. This includes the automobile industry and pharmaceutical companies, which make entirely medicines and medical products. This also includes the textile industry, designers who make clothes, and, if you have noticed, more and more people are showing up wearing very high-quality clothes. But they are not from foreign designers, but from Russian ones.
During the spring session of 2022, 7 meetings of the Duma were held, 20 laws and 59 resolutions were adopted. In total, more than 80 sessions were held on the site of the Moscow Parliamentary Center. The Parliament has its own library. At the entrance, you immediately pay attention to the large exposition. Here is the history of the Moscow City Duma and unusual gifts presented to the deputies by their foreign
We meet with our colleagues from other regions, from other countries. We study the experience of our colleagues. We talk about Moscow, we promote Moscow. We defend Moscow's interests. We want as many tourists as possible to come here. We want as many investors as possible from other regions and from other countries to invest money in Moscow, to create new businesses in Moscow. We have very active cooperation between parliaments, and when our colleagues come to visit us, they often give us gifts. Some gifts we bring back from our business trips, and they all find a place in our museum, which is located here in the parliamentary library of the Moscow City Duma.
The Parliamentary Library of the Moscow City Duma was created in 1993 when the capital's parliament had just begun its work. On the one hand, the library helps the current deputies in their work. On the other hand, scientists work here and dissertations related to Moscow are written. The library hosts roundtables, exhibitions and book presentations. Deputies pay a lot of attention to Moscow studies.
Moscow studies are, on the one hand, the history of Moscow, from ancient times to the present, and on the other hand, it's a science that studies modern Moscow. Moreover, it's also a science which is trying to look beyond the horizon. That is, to think about how Moscow may develop in the future. This is both an academic discipline carried out by scientists and a social movement made up of people who are fans of the city of Moscow, fans of its history. Projects connected with Moscow studies are carried out in schools, libraries, and museums. This subject engages school children, high school and university students, and retirees.
Tell us about the Moscow Militia Memorial Project.
This is one of the great pages of Moscow's history. It was at the initiative of the Moscow City Duma, at the initiative of our chairman, Alexei Valerievich Shaposhnikov, that we started this 7 years ago.
As part of the program, in memory of the Moscow People's Militia, the Parliamentary Library of the Moscow City Duma will be presented books devoted to the heroism of the Moscow Militia, as well as children's drawings. This is one of the many monuments of the capital to the Moscow People's Militia. In 1941, Muscovites volunteered to go to the front to save the city from the Nazi offensive. The Moscow City Duma pays special attention to preserving the memory of the defenders of the capital during the Great Patriotic War. The program, in the memory of the Moscow People's Militia, was implemented in the capital at the initiative of the Moscow City Duma in 2015 with the support of the Moscow government. As part of the project, monuments dedicated to each division of the militia were unveiled, historical books were published, and the column of the Moscow People's Militia has been involved in the campaign Immortal Regiment since 2018. Last year, the metro station, the People's Militia, was opened in the Russian capital, and a new memorial date was established, October the 11th, the day of the Moscow People's Militia. In memory of the heroes, a feature film called At the Heart's Call is being shot, which will involve grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the militia.
And the question is not just about the birth of the idea itself, but about the birth of the Moscow People's Militia Memorial Program, which the Moscow City Duma, with the support of the Moscow government and Sergei Sobyanin, has been implementing since 2015. And today, on July 3rd, on a symbolic day for the Moscow Militia, the day when the 1941 Moscow People's Militia was created, it's thanks to Voyen Film Studio and the Moscow Department of Culture, as well as Igor Ugolnikov, that we are starting here shooting the film By the Heart's Call, which is dedicated to the 1941 Moscow People's Militia. And if it were not for the Muscovites who take part in the filming today, and the descendants of the Moscow People's Militia, that we can honestly say that we are shooting a real people's film, dedicated to our Moscow heroes, People's Militia fighters, who were ordinary Muscovites, civilians, who worked in factories, studied at universities, teachers, people who were not connected with the army in any way.
The film is about the events of the summer and autumn of 1941, when almost 200,000 people volunteered to defend the borders of Moscow. Only a few came back from the battlefield. The Moscow City Duma will begin its work in September. Deputies plan to focus on social laws and work on the draft city budget. This is the programme Capital Ideas Life. I'm Mike Gibson. See you in our next show.